The morning light of 3 suns painted the metallic walls of Nexus 7 Station in shades of gold and silver. Deep in the heart of this massive structure, the Galactic Military Academy buzzed with activity. Cadets from 12 different worlds walked through the corridors, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors, shapes, and sizes. Commander Vex stood at the front of classroom Delta 7, reviewing his notes one final time. The tall, blue-skinned Altarian had been teaching military history for over 30 years. His forearms moved quickly as he organized the data tablets on his desk. Today would be different from all his previous classes. The door hissed open and cadets began filing in. There was Tom, a young Krillian with his gray, rock-like skin and methodical movements. Next came Lisa, a Thakari warrior with her golden fur and proud bearing. The insect-like hive spawn called Dave clicked his way to a seat near the back. 42 cadets in total, representing the best military minds from across the galaxy. They all knew each other well by now. This was their final semester at the academy, and they had studied together for 3 years. They had analyzed the great space battles of the Centauri Wars, examined the siege tactics of the Vegan Empire, and learned from the defensive strategies that saved the Rim worlds during the Dark Invasion. "Good morning, class," Commander Vex said, his voice carrying easily through the room. "Today, we begin our study of a new species, one that has recently joined our Federation." The cadets straightened in their seats. New species were always interesting to study. Each race brought unique approaches to warfare, different ways of thinking about strategy and tactics. "This species calls itself humanity," Vex continued. "They come from a world called Earth, located in what they call the Sol System." Tom raised one of his thick, gray hands. "Commander, I read the initial reports about humans. They seem to be traitors and diplomats. Mostly, do they even have a military worth studying?" Several cadets nodded in agreement. The reports they had all seen described humans as peaceful merchants who had recently developed faster-than-light travel. Their homeworld showed no signs of massive military installations. No orbital weapons platforms, no evidence of the grand fleet battles that most advanced species had fought. Commander Vex smiled, showing his sharp teeth. "That is exactly what makes them so interesting to study. You see, humans achieved spaceflight under very different circumstances than the rest of us." He pressed a button on his desk, and the room's holographic projectors came to life. A 3-dimensional image of Earth appeared in the center of the classroom, slowly rotating. It looked peaceful enough: blue oceans, white clouds, green and brown continents. Most species, Vex explained, achieve spaceflight only after unifying their home worlds. The Thakari ended their clan wars 500 years before reaching the stars. The Krillians formed their great assembly and declared eternal peace before building their first starships. Even my own people, the Altarians, spent centuries in harmony before looking beyond our world. Lisa, the Thakari cadet, nodded proudly. Her people's history of honor and unity was well known throughout the academy. "Humans," Vex continued, "are different. They reached the stars while still fighting wars on their home planet." The hologram changed, showing a map of Earth with red dots scattered across its surface. Each dot represented an active conflict zone. "But surely these are just small conflicts," said Mike, a tall, thin cadet from the Spiral Arm colonies. "Local disputes that will end once they advance further." Commander Vex's expression grew serious. "That is what we all thought. That is what the Federation Council believed when they approved humanity's membership. No, but then we gained access to their historical records." He gestured to the hologram, which now displayed a timeline stretching back several centuries. "You are about to see has never been shown to Academy cadets before. The Federation Council decided that future military officers should understand what humanity is truly capable of." The cadets leaned forward in their seats. It sounded much more interesting than they had expected. "We will begin with what humans call their modern military history, the past 200 years of their development." Vex pressed another button. "I must warn you, some of what you will see may be disturbing. Humans have a very different relationship with warfare than the rest of us." Bob, a cadet from the peaceful merchant worlds, raised his tentacle. "Commander, how different can it be?" All species fight when they must. It is basic survival. That, Vex replied, is exactly what we need to examine. For most species, war is a last resort. Something to be avoided if possible, ended quickly if necessary. But humans, ... He paused, searching for the right words. Humans seem to have made warfare into an art form. The hologram shifted again, showing what looked like a primitive battlefield. Soldiers in simple uniforms stood in long lines, firing crude weapons at each other across an open field. This is from their early industrial period, Vex explained. Already you can see differences. Most species at this level of technology fight in small groups, maybe hundreds of individuals. These humans are organizing thousands of soldiers into single battles. The scene changed, showing larger and larger battles. The weapons became more advanced, the armies grew bigger, and the destruction increased. But this is still primitive. Warfare, said Anne, a cadet from the crystal-based shard worlds. Once they advance technologically, surely they become more civilized. Commander Vex's smile disappeared entirely. That is what we all hoped. That is what the xenobiologists predicted. They were wrong. The hologram now showed a massive factory complex, with thousands of humans working to build weapons and vehicles. You are seeing is from just over 100 years ago. Humans called this period the Great War. It was the first time they industrialized warfare. The cadets watched in fascination as the display showed human society transforming itself. Economies dedicated to producing weapons. Millions of individuals trained for combat. Technology advancing at an incredible pace, all focused on becoming better at fighting. How long did this war last? Asked Tom. 4 years, Vex replied. 4 years of continuous fighting across multiple continents. Millions of casualties. When it ended, ... double quotes, he paused dramatically. They started preparing for the next one. The classroom fell silent. The idea that a species would immediately begin preparing for another war after such massive event of destruction was almost incomprehensible. Tomorrow, Commander Vex announced, we will examine what humans call World War II. I suggest you prepare yourselves. Mentally, what you have seen today is nothing compared to what comes next. As the cadets filed out of the classroom, they talked quietly among themselves. None of them had expected their final semester to include anything like this. They had thought they were studying a peaceful species of traitors. They were beginning to realize how wrong they had been. The next morning, only 38 cadets returned to classroom Delta 7. 4 seats remained empty. Commander Vex noticed, but said nothing as he prepared the day's lesson. The absent cadets had requested emergency transfers to other courses. During the night, today we continue our study of human warfare, Vex announced as the holographic projectors hummed to life. Yesterday we saw the beginning of what humans call industrialized warfare. Today, we examine what they consider their greatest conflict. The room darkened, and a 3-dimensional map of Earth appeared in the center. Red zones covered vast areas of the planet, much larger than the previous day's display. This is Earth during what humans call World War II, Vex said quietly. It lasted 6 years. It involved every major nation on their planet. Over 70 million humans died. Lisa, the Thakari cadet, gasped. 70 million? That's more than the entire population of most worlds. It gets worse, Vex replied. He gestured, and the hologram zoomed in on a section of Europe. Let me show you how this war began. The display showed German forces crossing into Poland. The cadets watched as mechanized armies swept across the countryside, using tactics they had never seen before. Fast-moving tanks supported by aircraft, coordinated to punch through enemy lines and surround entire armies. They call this Blitzkrieg Lightning War, Vex explained. Notice how quickly they adapt their technology and tactics. This is only 20 years after their first industrialized war, and they have completely changed how they fight. Tom raised his hand. But surely this is just one nation attacking a weaker neighbor. This happens sometimes. The hologram expanded, showing the war spreading across Europe, then to Africa, then across the Pacific Ocean to Asia. Within months, the conflict had become truly global. No, Tom, Vex said sadly. This is something much larger. Watch what happened when the humans realized they were facing total war. The display showed factories across multiple continents converting from civilian production to military equipment. Entire populations mobilized for war effort. Women and elderly humans taking over jobs while younger humans joined the military. Bob, the cadet from the merchant worlds, stared in disbelief. They transformed their entire civilization into a war machine. Yes, Vex confirmed, and they did it willingly. Look at these propaganda posters from the time. Images flashed across the hologram showing human art from the war period. Posters encouraging citizens to buy war bonds, to conserve food, to work harder in factories. The humans in these images looked determined, even eager to sacrifice for their war effort. But why? Asked Anne from the Shard Worlds. Why would an entire species choose to live this way? Because Vex replied, humans don't see war as something that happens to them. They see it as something they do. Watch this. The hologram now showed the siege of a city called Leningrad. For 900 days, the city was surrounded by enemy forces. Food ran out. People starved. The temperature dropped far below freezing. Any rational species would surrender, Vex explained. The city had no strategic value worth this level of suffering. The cadets watched in horror as the display showed humans eating bread made from sawdust, burning furniture for heat, and continuing to work in factories even while starving. They never surrendered, Vex said quietly. 900 days of this, and they never even considered surrender. Dave, the hive spawn cadet, clicked his mandibles nervously. This is not logical behavior. My people would negotiate a peaceful solution. Your people are sensible, Vex replied. Humans are not. Let me show you something else. The scene changed to show a series of small islands in a vast ocean. Tropical paradise locations that should have been peaceful. The Pacific. Theater, Vex announced. Humans fought for 3 years over these tiny pieces of land. Watch how they fought. The hologram showed human forces launching massive amphibious assaults on heavily defended beaches. Thousands of soldiers charging into machine gun fire, knowing most would die before reaching the enemy positions. This is the Battle of Iwo Jima, Vex explained. The island is 8 square miles, completely worthless except as a symbol. The humans spent 36 days fighting for it. 27,000 casualties. Mike from the Spiral Arm colonies stood up suddenly. I need to leave. Sit down, Mike, Vex said firmly. You need to see this? No, I don't, Mike replied, his voice shaking. This is madness. No species fights like this. No species would choose to fight like this. But they did choose it, Vex said. That's what you need to understand. Every human society on their planet made the same choice. When faced with total war, they embraced it completely. Mike sat back down reluctantly, but several other cadets looked like they wanted to leave as well. The hologram now showed the war in the Soviet Union. Massive tank battles involving thousands of armored vehicles. Cities reduced to rubble, then fought over building by building. Millions of soldiers locked in combat across a front that stretched for thousands of miles. This is the Battle of Stalingrad, Vex said. The humans fought in the ruins of a city for 5 months. They fought in sewers, in bombed-out buildings, sometimes in hand-to-hand combat, room by room. The display showed human soldiers fighting, with knives and clubs when they ran out of ammunition, using rubble as weapons, never retreating even when their positions became hopeless. Why? Whispered Lisa. Why not just retreat and regroup? 'Cause Vex replied. Humans don't retreat, they don't regroup. They fight until they win or until they die. Watch this. The hologram showed the final phase of the war. As German forces retreated, they destroyed everything behind them. Bridges, factories, farms, entire cities. The humans called it scorched earth tactics. They would rather destroy their own territory than let the enemy have it, Vex explained. When the Allies finally reached Germany, the German civilians fought in the streets rather than surrender. The cadets watched 12-year-old human children shooting at soldiers with rifles almost as big as they were. Elderly humans throwing grenades from windows. Entire families choosing death over surrender. This is not warfare, said Tom, his grayskin turning even paler. This is species-wide suicide, Vex corrected. This is how humans fight. total commitment. No compromise. No surrender. The hologram now showed something that made several cadets gasp in horror. A massive explosion, brighter than the sun, engulfing an entire city. They built weapons that could destroy entire cities, Vex said quietly, and they used them on their own species. The mushroom cloud rose into the sky as the cadets watched in stunned silence. The scale of destruction was beyond anything they had imagined possible. 2 cities, Vex continued. 2 weapons. 200,000 dead in seconds. Anne stood up, her crystalline form trembling. I can't watch anymore. Neither can I, said Bob, his tentacles curling in distress. By the end of the class, 14 cadets had walked out. Empty chairs seemed to echo in the suddenly quiet room. Commander Vex looked at the remaining 28 cadets. Tomorrow, we study what humans call their limited conflicts. I suggest you prepare yourselves. What you saw today was just the beginning. When Commander Vex arrived at Classroom Delta 7 the next morning, only 24 cadets were waiting for him. The empty seats seemed to grow larger each day. He had received formal withdrawal requests from 4 more cadets during the night, all citing psychological stress and incompatible worldviews. Good morning, Vex said, settling his forearms on the desk. I know yesterday was difficult. What you witnessed was the largest conflict in human history. You might think that. After such destruction, humans would have learned to live in peace. The remaining cadets looked at him with a mixture of hope and dread. They had spent the night trying to process what they had seen. The scale of World War II was beyond anything in their species' histories. You would be wrong, Vex continued. The atomic weapons that ended World War II were used in 1945. By 1950, humans were fighting again. The holographic projectors activated, showing a map of a peninsula in Asia. Red zones marked areas of active combat. This is Korea, Vex explained. 3 years of warfare. Over 3 million dead. And this time, the humans had learned new ways to fight. The display showed jet aircraft screaming across the sky, faster than anything the cadets had seen before. Helicopters carrying troops into battle zones that had been impossible to reach in previous wars. Artillery that could strike targets dozens of miles away with precision. Notice how quickly their technology advanced, Vex pointed out. Only 5 years after World War II ended, and they had completely revolutionized their military equipment. Tom, one of the few Krillians still remaining, shook his head slowly. But surely this was the last one. Surely they learned. The hologram changed, showing a jungle landscape. Humans in different uniforms moved through dense vegetation, carrying weapons that looked nothing like the ones from Korea. Vietnam, Vex announced. This war lasted over a decade. 58,000 American deaths. Over 2 million Vietnamese deaths. And here, humans learned something new. The display showed small groups of humans moving through the jungle, attacking larger forces, and then disappearing. Urban warfare in cities where civilians and soldiers mixed together. Tactics that had never been seen before. Guerrilla warfare, Vex explained. Humans fighting humans using methods that blur the line between soldier and civilian. Watch how they adapted. The cadets saw human forces using helicopters to drop small teams behind enemy lines. Chemical weapons that destroyed entire forests. Bombing campaigns that lasted for years. But the most disturbing part, Vex continued, is how the humans back home reacted to this war. The hologram showed crowds of humans protesting in the streets, not celebrating their military, but demanding the war end. Children throwing flowers at soldiers, people burning their own flags. They fought a war while half their population opposed it, Vex said, and they kept fighting for over 10 years. Lisa, the Thakari cadet, looked confused. How can a species fight a war when their own people don't support it? That's what makes humans so dangerous, Vex replied. They don't need unity to wage war. They don't need popular support. They just need a reason, and they will find a way to fight. The display changed again, showing a desert landscape. Tanks moving across sand dunes in perfect formation. The Gulf War, Vex announced. 42 days of combat, the humans used. Something they called smart weapons. Missiles that could fly hundreds of miles and hit targets the size of a single building. The cadets watched precision bombing attacks that destroyed specific rooms and buildings while leaving the rest untouched. Laser-guided munitions that could follow moving targets. Stealth aircraft that were invisible to radar. 25 years. After Vietnam, and they had completely changed warfare again, Vex noted. Other species spend centuries developing new military technology. Humans do it in decades. Anne from the Shard Worlds raised her crystalline hand. But surely this precision warfare is better? Less destructive? Watch, Vex said grimly. Holograms showed the aftermath of the precision attacks. Entire cities without power or water. Hospitals that couldn't function. Civilians suffering from the collapse of basic infrastructure. Humans learned to destroy their enemy's ability to fight without destroying the physical structures, Vex explained. They called it strategic warfare. They could cripple an entire civilization without firing a single shot at civilian targets. The display continued, showing conflict after conflict. Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria. Each war introduced new tactics, new technologies, new ways of thinking about combat. But the most disturbing development, Vex said, is how humans began fighting multiple wars simultaneously. The hologram now showed a global map with red zones scattered across every continent. Dates flashed by showing that many of these conflicts overlapped in time. While fighting in Afghanistan, humans were also fighting in Iraq. While fighting in Iraq, they were conducting operations in Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, and Libya. At one point, human forces were actively engaged in combat operations on 4 different continents at the same time. Bob from the Merchant Worlds stood up abruptly. This is impossible. No species has the resources to fight so many wars at once. Humans do, Vex replied simply. They built their entire civilization around the ability to project military force anywhere on their planet. Within hours, the display showed human aircraft carriers, floating military bases that could move anywhere in the ocean, transport planes that could deploy troops to any point on Earth in less than a day, satellite networks that could coordinate military operations across the entire planet. They created a global military infrastructure, Vex continued. Other species build armies to defend their territories. Humans built armies to fight anywhere, anytime, against anyone. The hologram showed something that made several cadets gasp. Humans fighting in cities, moving from building to building, room to room. But these weren't the massive battles of World War II. These were small units. Maybe a dozen soldiers, fighting with weapons that looked like science fiction. Urban warfare, Vex explained. Humans learned to fight in their own cities. 8. Vision goggles that let them see in complete darkness. Not body armor that could stop bullets. Communication systems that let every soldier talk to every other soldier instantly. Ow. The display showed human soldiers fighting in sewers, on rooftops, in subway tunnels. They fought in schools, hospitals, and homes. No location was too sacred. No terrain too difficult. Even learned to fight in cyberspace, Vex added. The hologram showed computer networks being attacked, power grids failing, communication systems being disrupted, warfare without physical weapons, battles fought with code and algorithms. Dave, the hive-spawn cadet, clicked his mandibles nervously. How do you defend against an enemy that fights in dimensions you can't even see? You don't, Vex replied. That's the point. Humans don't just fight wars. They invent new ways to fight wars. Every conflict teaches them something new, and they apply those lessons to the next conflict. The hologram showed the most recent human conflicts. Drone warfare where humans could kill enemies on the other side of the planet without leaving their own territory. Special operations so secret that even other humans didn't know about them. Cyber attacks that could cripple entire nations without a single shot being fired. And the most frightening part, Vex concluded, is that humans consider all of this normal. They don't see constant warfare as a problem to be solved. They see it as a natural state of existence. By the time the class ended, 6 more cadets had quietly left the room. The remaining 18 sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had learned. These weren't just warriors. These were creatures that had turned warfare into an art form, a science, and a way of life all at the same time. Commander Vex entered Classroom Delta 7 to find only 12 cadets waiting for him. The room that had once been full of eager young minds now felt empty and cold. 6 more withdrawal requests had arrived during the night, each citing the same reason. Unable to continue studies due to fundamental incompatibility with subject matter. Today we move beyond history, Vex announced as he activated the holographic systems. Today we examine what human military doctrine means for galactic warfare. The remaining cadets shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had spent 3 days watching human conflicts, each one more disturbing than the last. Now they would learn what it all meant. The Academy's strategic computers have been running simulations, Vex continued. We have taken everything we know about human military capabilities and applied it to modern galactic warfare scenarios. A 3-dimensional map of the local galaxy appeared in the center of the room. Familiar trade routes, planetary systems, and Federation territories glowed in peaceful blue light. The first simulation is simple, Vex explained. What would happen if humanity decided to leave the Federation and pursue military expansion? The hologram changed. Red lines began spreading from Earth's location, moving along the trade routes like an infection. Within minutes, the entire map was covered in spreading red zones. The computers predict total galactic conquest within 50 standard years, Vex said quietly. Tom, the Krillian cadet, laughed nervously. That's impossible. Humans don't have the fleet strength to conquer even one major world. You're thinking like a traditional species, Vex replied. What? Watch what the computers predict humans would actually do. The hologram showed Earth transforming. Every asteroid in their system being converted into military shipyards. Their entire population mobilizing for war production. Within a single year, Earth was producing more military vessels than the rest of the Federation combined. Humans don't fight wars with the military they have, Vex explained. They build the military they need. Remember, they converted their entire planet into a war machine twice in the 20th century. The computers predict they could do the same thing on an interstellar scale. Lisa, the Thakari cadet, stared at the display. But surely other species would unite against such a threat? The second simulation addresses that question, Vex replied. The hologram now showed the Federation's combined fleets moving to stop human expansion. The blue dots representing Federation ships outnumbered the red human ships by more than 10 to 1. Any rational species would retreat when facing such overwhelming odds, Vex said. Humans are not rational. The simulation played out. Instead of retreating, the human forces attacked. They didn't try to win fair battles. They used tactics that made the watching cadets gasp in horror. Human ships rammed into Federation vessels, destroying both in massive explosions. Suicide. Attacks against civilian infrastructure. Boarding actions where human soldiers fought to the death in the corridors of enemy ships. Chemical weapons deployed against entire planets. They don't fight to win battles, Vex explained, as the simulation continued. They fight to win wars. Watch what happens when the Federation destroys their first fleet. The hologram showed human space being invaded. Federation forces landed on human colonies, expecting to find a defeated enemy ready to surrender. Instead, they found entire populations that had been transformed into guerrilla fighters. Every human civilian becomes a soldier, Vex said. Children making bombs in school basements. Elderly humans conducting suicide attacks against occupation forces. The computers predict that conquering a single human world would require a 20-year occupation and cost millions of lives. Anne from the Shard world stood up suddenly. This is madness. No species fights this way. Exactly, Vex replied. Ow. That's what makes them so dangerous. Every other species fights according to rules. Humans make new rules as they go. The simulation continued. Even as Federation forces occupied human territory, new human fleets kept appearing. They built shipyards in asteroid belts, in empty space, even inside the hulks of destroyed ships. Every defeat only seemed to make them more determined. The computers ran this simulation 1,000 times, Vex said. Human victory in 912 cases. Federation victory in 88 cases. But even in the Federation victories, the cost was total galactic civilization collapse. Dave, the hive-spawn cadet, clicked his mandibles frantically. How is this possible? They are just one species. Because they think differently about warfare, Vex replied. Watch this. The hologram showed a new simulation. This time, humans were defending Earth against an invasion by superior alien forces. The cadets expected to see humanity quickly overwhelmed and defeated. Instead, they watched Earth transform into something that defied comprehension. The entire planet became a weapon. Cities were rebuilt as fortresses. Civilians were armed and trained for guerrilla warfare. Even the planet's weather systems were weaponized. The siege of Earth simulation, Vex announced. The computers predict that conquering Earth would require destroying the entire planet, and even then human survivors would continue fighting. From hidden bases throughout their solar system, the display showed human resistance fighters operating from bases on Mars, in the asteroid belt, even on the moons of Jupiter. They launched constant attacks against the occupying forces, never allowing the enemy to feel safe anywhere in the system. But surely, said Bob from the Merchant Worlds, they would eventually run out of resources. That's what makes this so terrifying, Vex replied. Humans don't just use resources, they create resources. Watch. The simulation showed humans stripping resources from everywhere. Asteroid mining operations built in secret. Salvage operations that turned destroyed enemy ships into new weapons. Even garbage was converted into military supplies. They fought World War II for 6 years while their factories were being bombed daily, Vex explained. The computers predict they could fight a galactic war for centuries. The hologram changed to show something even more disturbing. Humans developing new weapons during the middle of battles, technology advancing at impossible speeds under the pressure of warfare. Human innovation accelerates during conflict, Vex continued. What takes other species decades to develop, humans can create in months when they're fighting for survival. The display showed human scientists working in underground laboratories while battles raged overhead. New weapons being tested and deployed within weeks of invention. Military technology advancing so quickly that human forces at the end of a war were completely different from those at the beginning. They don't just adapt to warfare, Vex said. They evolve during warfare. Mike from the Spiral Arm colonies raised his hand with a shaking arm. Commander, surely these are just computer predictions. Reality would be different. The computers base their predictions on human historical behavior, Vex replied. Every scenario they modeled has actually happened in human history, multiple times. The hologram now showed historical examples. Humans fighting impossible odds and winning through sheer determination. Entire populations choosing death over surrender. Military innovations born from desperate necessity. The siege of Leningrad lasted 900 days, Vex reminded them. The Warsaw Ghetto fighters held out for months against overwhelming odds. When humans decide to resist, they resist until they die. The final simulation appeared on the hologram. This one showed humans as reluctant participants in a galactic war, fighting only to defend their allies. Even as defenders, Vex said, humans changed the nature of warfare itself. The display showed human forces introducing tactics that other species had never imagined. Psychological warfare that broke enemy morale before battles began. Logistics. Systems that could supply armies across impossible distances. Command structures that allowed for instant adaptation to changing conditions. They don't just fight wars, Vex concluded. They revolutionize wars. Every conflict becomes a laboratory for new forms of destruction. By the end of the class, 4 more cadets had quietly left. The 8 remaining survivors looked at each other with hollow eyes, finally beginning to understand what they had been studying. These simulations weren't theoretical exercises. They were predictions of what would happen if humanity ever returned to their natural state of warfare. Commander Vex stood before the nearly empty classroom. Only 5 cadets remained from the original 42. The Krillian sat with his gray skin pale and his hands trembling. Lisa the Thakari warrior looked smaller than before, her golden fur dulled by stress. Anne from the Shard Worlds flickered with nervous energy. Bob from the Merchant Worlds had wrapped all his tentacles around himself like a protective shell. Dave the Hivespawn sat perfectly still, his compound eyes staring at nothing. "Today is our final session," Vex announced, his forearms folded across his chest. "Today you learn why this course exists," as the holographic projectors remained dark. No maps, no battle scenes, no disturbing images. Just 5 exhausted cadets and their instructor in a quiet room. "You have spent 5 days studying human military history," Vex continued. "You have seen their wars, their tactics, their complete dedication to the art of destruction. Now you must learn the truth about humanity's place in the Federation." Tom raised one shaking hand. "Commander, I don't understand. Humans are traitors and diplomats. They joined the Federation peacefully. They haven't started any wars since joining us." "That," Vex replied, "is exactly the point." He walked to the front of his desk and sat on its edge, looking more like a tired teacher than a military commander. "Let me tell you a story," he began. 30 years ago, the Federation Council received first reports about a species called humanity. They had achieved faster-than-light travel and were exploring nearby star systems. Standard first contact protocols were initiated. The 5 cadets listened carefully. This was information they had never heard before. The initial surveys were encouraging, Vex continued. Humans appeared to be peaceful traders with basic technology. Their planet showed no signs of massive military installations, no orbital weapons platforms, no evidence of recent large-scale warfare. Anne's crystalline form brightened slightly. "So they really were peaceful when we found them?" "No," Vex said quietly. "They were actively fighting wars on 3 continents when our scouts first observed Earth. We just didn't recognize what we were seeing." The room fell silent. "See," Vex explained, "every other species in the Federation achieved spaceflight the same way. They unified their homeworld first, ended all internal conflicts, and then reached for the stars as a united people. It never occurred to us that a species might develop interstellar travel while still fighting wars. Bob uncoiled one tentacle nervously. "But the report said they were peaceful. The report said they had no major military installations visible." "From space," Vex corrected. "It's because humans hide their military capabilities. Other species build massive fortress worlds and orbital battle stations. Humans build their military strength in ways that are almost invisible." He stood up and began pacing the small space in front of the class. "While our scouts were cataloging human trade vessels and diplomatic facilities, human military forces were conducting operations on 6 different continents. While we were noting their peaceful space exploration, human weapons designers were developing new forms of warfare. While we were preparing first contact protocols, humans were fighting a global war on terror." Lisa's ears flattened against her head. "A global war?" "But our reports never mentioned any global conflicts." "Because humans don't fight the kind of wars we understand," Vex replied. "We were looking for massive fleet battles and planetary invasions. Instead, humans were fighting asymmetric conflicts using special operations forces, drone strikes, and cyber warfare.
Ow.
Their wars were almost invisible to outside observers." The cadets began to understand the magnitude of what they were learning. "The Federation Council spent 5 years debating whether to make contact with humanity," Vex continued. "The debate wasn't about whether they were advanced enough to join us. The debate was about whether they were too dangerous to contact at all." Dave clicked his mandibles once. "Too dangerous." "The xenobiologists who studied humanity came to a terrifying conclusion," Vex explained. "Humans were the most militarily capable species ever discovered. It's not because of their technology, but because of their psychology." He stopped pacing and looked directly at each remaining cadet. "Every other species treats warfare as an unfortunate necessity. Humans treat warfare as a natural state of existence. Every other species seeks to end conflicts quickly and return to peace. Humans seek to win conflicts completely and permanently. Every other species sees war as a failure of diplomacy. Humans see diplomacy as a continuation of war by other means." The implications were staggering. Tom's gray skin had turned almost white. "The council faced an impossible choice," Vex continued. Leave humanity alone, and risk them developing into an existential threat to galactic civilization. Or make contact and try to redirect their natural aggression toward peaceful purposes. Anne's crystalline structure flickered rapidly. They chose to make contact? Yes, Vex confirmed. But not the way we normally conduct first contact. Everything about humanity's introduction to the Federation was carefully planned to avoid triggering their military instincts. He returned to his desk and activated a small holographic display. Showed Earth surrounded by Federation ships, but not in a threatening formation. First contact was designed to satisfy human curiosity rather than challenge human pride, Vex explained. We approached them as fellow explorers, not as superior beings. We offered them trade and knowledge rather than demanding submission. We presented Federation membership as an opportunity for expansion rather than an end to their independence. Bob uncurled slightly, and it worked. So far, Vex replied. Humans have been Federation members for 15 years. In that time, their internal conflicts have decreased dramatically. They've redirected their exploratory instincts toward mapping new star systems. They've channeled their competitive nature into trade and scientific research. The cadets felt a moment of relief. Perhaps the story had a happy ending after all. But, Vex continued, his voice growing serious again, we must never forget what they are capable of. The peaceful humanity you know today exists only because we have successfully kept them engaged with non-military challenges. If they ever become bored with exploration and trade, if they ever feel threatened by other Federation species, if they ever decide that conquest is more interesting than commerce, he let the sentence hang in the air. That's why this course exists, Vex finally said. You 5 cadets who completed the full program now understand human warfare better than any beings in the galaxy except humans themselves. You are the Federation's insurance policy. Lisa looked confused. Insurance policy? If humanity ever returns to their natural state of warfare, Vex explained, you will be the only military officers capable of understanding their tactics and predicting their strategies. You will be responsible for finding ways to contain or redirect their aggression before it destroys galactic civilization. The weight of responsibility settled on the 5 remaining cadets like a heavy blanket. You have been inducted into the most classified program in Federation history, Vex continued. You will be assigned to key military positions throughout the galaxy. You will monitor human activities and report any signs of increased military activity. And if the worst ever happens, you will be the ones who must find a way to stop them. Dave's compound eyes focused on Vex. And if we can't stop them? Vex was quiet for a long moment before answering. Then we pray that humans remain satisfied with peaceful exploration, he said finally. Because the alternative is the end of everything we have built. As the 5 cadets left the classroom for the final time, each carried the same terrible knowledge. Humanity wasn't invited to join galactic civilization as equals. They were invited as the ultimate contingency plan, a way of keeping the galaxy's most dangerous species happy and distracted. The peaceful traders and explorers that the rest of the Federation knew were just another face of humanity. Underneath that peaceful exterior lay the most effective military force the galaxy had ever seen. And only these 5 beings truly understood what that meant.